This is a Muscle Cat Media production.
Welcome back to the Expats as we continue to hurtle toward not only the World Baseball Classic, but opening day in Major League Baseball. Spring training games have started, but we are still well and truly in the thick of Spoon's future plays. Welcome into part 3, where today we will have a look at division winners across Major League Baseball. He's been scouring the form up and down, as he tends to do, our man Spoon, and we welcome in now. Spoon, hello, my friend.
How you going, mate?
Very well. I get a sense, look, it's every single day that I wake up, you just have more ideas for things that you want to give the people, tips for free to try and make them money. You truly are a man of the people.
Well, I definitely need to recover a few units after the silver slipper on Saturday, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too. You were giving your horse Shiki the hard sell to, I think, anybody that would listen, and rightfully so. And like maybe the jury's still out on that horse a little bit, but I will say that I'm not falling off heading to the Golden Slipper in a couple weeks. I don't think you should either.
Yeah, well, if we can get, if Tim Clark ever replies to my drunken DMs on Instagram, we'll try and get him on the podcast to explain himself.
I think it's probably best that he doesn't. It's probably best that you revoke anything that you did send to him on Saturday. Look, it wasn't his best, but we digress, and we'll get on to baseball. Look, the way this will work, we'll start in the National League, and then we'll have a look at the American League. We'll move west to east, left to right on the sheet of paper. I think that's the logical way to move. And in doing so, and doing it this way, we're essentially going to start with probably the most boring division of all. The National League West in 2026, the Dodgers sitting at $1.15, the obvious favorites. So the favorites not only for the NL West, but for the NL pennant and for the World Series. Big yawn. The other teams in that division in terms of pricing, the Padres are $8.50, the Giants $21, Diamondbacks $23. And for anyone brave enough to put a shekel on the Colorado Rockies, they are sitting at $301. These prices are on Bet365. Spoon, is there any way that we can potentially play the NL West this year and make a quid?
Yeah, so for those unfamiliar with betting, that means at 301, if you put $5 on the Colorado Rockies, you lose $5. I think it's interesting, and as we go through each division, I'll just talk to the Fangraph win projections and division win projections, because there are a few, I guess, differences with where the bookies are seeing it from Fangraph. So depending how much weight you put into the Fangraphs projections, you might be able to shop for a little bit of value there. So with the NL West, obviously the Dodgers, they're at 93.9% to win the division. But where it's interesting is the Giants are at 2.7%, the D-backs are at 2.1%, and the Padres are actually at 1.3%, which has them effectively fourth favorite, which is the inverse of where they are from a betting position. We spoke about this in our sort of episode 2, I think, of Futures, or maybe even episode 1 last week. I think the only way you can play this is by betting on who's going to come second in the division. And if by any metric or any means your team is starting to go too well and the Dodgers are 10 games behind, I think you'll be able to hedge pretty easily by taking the Dodgers at, if they ever got out to $2, you'd be able to secure insurance on your bet. So this is the only division we'll do this for, but on those markets, or on that market for the 3 teams in question, and again with Bet365, so always price shop where you can. To run second in the division, the Padres are $1.90, which suggests they're over a 50% chance of finishing there, which is quite different to where Fangraphs have them. They've kind of got, if you look at that, it's that 4.8, 6.1. They've got them at about a 1 in 4 chance of finishing second. The D-backs are then $5 and the Giants are $3.90. I, for obvious reasons, like the D-backs to finish second in the division. I think the Giants also have a pretty strong case too. I couldn't be taking Padres at $1.90 in what's effectively a 3-horse race. And no matter which sort of win projection metrics you look at, they are expected to be right around an 80-win team, which is where the D-backs and the Giants sit too. So look, head's probably leaning a little bit towards the Giants, heart's leaning a little bit towards the D-backs. I actually think you can take both of those at, $4 and $5. Again, if the Dodgers fall off completely, you'll be able to secure your money back by taking them as they drift out to win the whole division. And you're basically fading that the Padres aren't going to be the second best team in a really strong 4-team division.
Is that a market that, at least to your knowledge, stays open for the majority of the season?
The win the division market will all season. So I think if you took the D-backs and the Giants, for example, and one of those was going really well, the Dodgers would go out to $2 or beyond. And I think at $2, if you ever saw $2 about the Dodgers for the NL West, you'd take it, you'd stake whatever your investment was on D-backs or Giants or both. And then you've pretty much secured a sweat-free profit for the rest of the year.
You may have said it there, but I missed it. What are the Dodgers paying for that to finish exactly second market in the NL West?
It's a great question, actually. I didn't even put it in my little cheat sheet because they're obviously going to finish third. I think I had them division finishing position is the name of the market. And then
As a Dodgers team to win it,
Dodgers is $6.
Yeah, okay. I actually thought it would have been a little bit higher than that. I mean, the inverse of $1.15. Well, I guess the inverse of $1.15 is or $1.20 would be $5. So $1.15. Yeah, that's actually probably decent value. That to me is then saying that the bookie is saying they are not finishing any worse than second under any circumstances if the simulation runs 12 million times. There's no way they finish. Because again, it's not as though it's $6 to not win the division. It's $6 to finish exactly second. So that to me says that all the simulations are saying that there's absolutely no way whatsoever that the Dodgers finish anything other than first or second in the division, which makes sense.
Which makes sense if you factor in that they're protecting themselves against one bolter out of three, clear tier 2 teams in the division. What they're not expecting whatsoever is that the Dodgers, for them to finish worse than second, they'd be having to have a bad year more than the Giants, D-backs, or Padres have a good year. So a little bit of insurance there. But like I said, I think the better way to play it is to lock in on one of those two teams or both in the event that, you're taking on the Padres, which I'm kind of happy to do. And then if for whatever reason one of those teams was going too well, you'd be able to get an insurance bet about the Dodgers later in the year.
So the tip to win the division obviously is the Los Angeles Dodgers, but because there's no value in betting that, Spoon's saying have a shekel on both the Diamondbacks and the Giants to finish second in that division. And if either of them do so, you'll make a little bit of profit. Let's move a little bit further east out of the NL West into the NL Central, which is pretty intriguing this year, to be fair. Take a look at the market. The Chicago Cubs are the favorites in the NL Central at $2.20. The Brewers, who obviously last year were oh so close to finding themselves in a World Series, $3.40. Cincinnati Reds at $4.50, which is a bit surprising for me, that price. Then we get out to the Pirates at $10 and the lowly St. Louis Cardinals, the outsider, at $23. Who do we like in the NL Central, Spoon?
I thought this was the most interesting pricing in comparison or contrast to the Fangraphs percentages. Fangraphs have the Cubs at 44.5% to win the division. Then they've got the Pirates at 23.6% chance to win the division, which is a long way off their 10-1 quote that you just mentioned. The Brewers are then third at 19.8%. The Reds are at 8.9%, which again is a long way off their $4.50 quote. And then the Cardinals are at 3.2%, which is sort of right in line with that 23-1 market. I really struggled to make sense of that because I personally don't have the Pirates that high to suggest that they're going to be even second in the division. And 23.6% is an implied price from an odds point of view of about $4.50, which is where the Reds are. And the Reds at 9% is kind of in line with where the Pirates are. So I don't know if someone's just messed up there as far as, not saying that, Vegas just exclusively use Fangraphs as a way to set their prices, but they're almost swapped there. And I think what's lost in that as well is that the Brewers are, according to Fangraphs, the third most likely team to win that division. And they're closest to the Cubs in betting, just behind them at $3.40. Look, for me, this is, I think, probably the easiest one and maybe the only one where I'm going to be a little bit boring and take the favorite. I think the Cubs at $2.20 is quite generous. I think it's much higher than a 50% chance. Yes, the Brewers overachieve for a long, extended period of time, but they have lost some key players, headlined by Freddie Peralta, which we've already talked about. And I just don't know how long they can stay close without getting it done and without spending big money or making trades or reinforcing both pitching and offense, which they haven't really done. So in a year where, to your point a couple of weeks ago, the Cardinals are sort of out of it for the first time in a very long time, I need to see the Reds and the Pirates nearly do it before I can say that they're going to do it. I think I'll just be taking $2.20 about the Cubs, and that's probably going to be a little bit of a multi-play with a few others because I'm not going to hit it as a single, but there are a couple of others here that I like at value as it is. And if you're getting over double the odds by throwing the Cubs in, I think I'll play it that way.
Look, I think that is probably the most sensible way to play the NL Central. Two things on that. If you were going to take a team to finish exactly second in the NL Central, do you look at the Pirates? Fangraphs has them estimated as the second best team win-wise in the NL Central this year. And based on the year that they had last year, look, I guess they came home relatively well and they will be improved, but Fangraphs has them above 500 this year, which is a bit surprising in terms of preseason projections for me for a team like Pittsburgh, because like you said, you'd want to see them do it before.
Yeah, I think there's probably a little bit of respect being given to some of their offseason acquisitions. They went out and got Marcell Ozuna. They went out and got Ryan O'Hearn. They've got Brandon Lowe as well, Brandon Lau. It's on one of those MLB TV, interrupting things in commercial breaks where they ask him how to pronounce his surname. And clearly I haven't listened to it for a while.
You've listened to it 1,700 times and you still don't know how to pronounce it
out because it's been the off season. But that's actually all of a sudden, you look at that top six: O'Neal Cruz, Spencer Horwitz, Brian Reynolds, Ozuna, O'Hearn, Lau, and then, Joey Bart as a sort of reclamation project after it didn't work out in the Bay. It's not bad. Obviously, Paul Skeens is doing a heap of the heavy lifting rotation-wise. But I think I talked about this rotation when we were sort of talking about a few different teams and a few different projections a week or two ago, and it drops off massively behind Skeens. Mitch Keller, Bubba Chandler, sure, very interesting. Braxton Ashcraft couldn't really squeeze into a rotation in the same team, in the same division here in the NL Central. And then Jose Urquidy, who the Astros were pretty happy to let go. I can't really make a case for them finishing second, with the exception of, the value there in contrast to where Fangraphs projections have them. If we look at the pricing for that, the division exact position, Pittsburgh were $9 for second place, $4.60 for third, and then $2.70 for fourth. So if you're kind of saying that they're not going to win the division, which I'm saying, I kind of like putting a little bit on second and third, to be honest, because I don't think they're going to finish fourth either. I think they'll be better than the Reds. They could even be better than the Brewers, but they're not going to be better than the Cubs, should be better than the Cardinals. $9 though, second position, in line with what's a 24% per Fangraphs chance to win the division, is probably not a bad little bit of value.
Yeah, it's what's the opposite of a ladder? Because that's basically what that would be if you're playing a ladder in the opposite direction.
A snake.
I guess we can't say avalanche. Eric has coined that and won't let us use it for anything else. Look, that's a pretty interesting market. I'm with you. I do think the Cubs are rightful favorites in that division. But yeah, there is a lot of respect being put on the Pirates' name this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. So it's a pretty easy go of things in the NL Central as far as Spoon's picks are going. He's picking the Cubs to win the division and saying take the 220 outright. And it might feature in maybe a division multi whenever we get to the end of the program today. Well, let's move out west, the final division east, rather. We're moving west to east. We're going east. The NL East in 2026, another close market, at least at the top. The Marlins and Nationals are basically given no chance in the NL East this year, and probably rightfully so. The Mets are slight favorites, $2.75, just 5 cents ahead of the Braves, who are at $2.80, and the Phillies at $2.80 as well. The Marlins all the way out to $36, and you've got to go to $101 to get to Spoon's Washington Nationals, the outsider of the field in the NL East. I don't recall ever seeing a division champion market that has 3 teams separated by only 5 cents.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, if it's probably where I would price it, albeit the team I like, I probably would have had it 240, 250, and the other two a little bit longer. I'll explain shortly. Again, just looking at the Fangraphs win percentage, this is in line with where I've sort of got it. They've got the Braves at 43.1%, the Mets at 34.2%, and the Phillies at 22%. I mean, I've spoken a couple of times already about how I think the Braves are really in line for a bounce back year. Last year was just truly too bad to be true as far as if you look at the starts they got. I had it up before from their starting pitching. I mean, half of the rotation was out for a large chunk of the year, and they were really just stitching together sort of AAA guys. And by the time guys like Ronnie came back, Spencer Strider came back, the season was over. They were way too far out of what was a competitive wild card race in the end. You had Chris Sale make 21 starts, so he was probably the best of them. And Spencer Strider made 23 starts as well, but a lot of those were in really low leverage situations with the season out. Um, Perennial pronunciation villain Spencer Schwellenbach made just 17 starts, but he's expected to be out for a couple of months, I think, to start the year. And then they had a guy called Joey Wentz make 14 starts for a 5-something ERA. And it just kind of got worse and worse from there. They were really deep into both their farm and just their veteran arm situation. Look, the opening day lineup and rotation reads really well to me. You've got a lineup of Acuna, Baldwin, Matt Olson, Profar, who again, had that PED suspension pop up after like a really nice start to the season. Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris, Eli White, and Mauricio Dubon. I think that looks pretty solid. I think defensively it's brilliant. Obviously, Michael Harris is probably, if not maybe for Pete Crow Armstrong, the best defensive center fielder in baseball we've seen for the last couple of years. Guys like Mauricio Dubon play really solid defense, even though it's maybe not as strong a hitting lineup as we've seen from recent Brave seasons. And I think, as I spoke about on the Futures episode, as far as Acuna for stolen bases, if he can recapture anything close to that MVP season, then look out. Rotation, Chris Sale, excellent last year. He posted 4 WAR even in an interrupted year. Spencer Strider was just getting hit all over the place when he came back from his Tommy John surgery, but I think there's still a heap of upside for him. He's one of the best strikeout artists in baseball. Reynaldo Lopez, there was a lot of talk about his impact potentially for the Braves last year when he signed as a starter, and he made 1 start before getting hurt. So we're going to see a lot more from him. Grant Holmes had a pretty solid year as a 4th pitcher last year, and Bryce Elder just was the guy, albeit he got hit around a lot. He made 28 starts last year. He was kind of their ace by the end of the season. All of a sudden now he's the SP5. I think the Mets kind of missed out on a couple of the guys they really wanted, and you could say the same about the Phillies. They were both linked with some bigger names. I understand that the Mets did get, Bo Bichette, and they made some moves. I'm just not sure they were the moves they wanted to make, and all they ended up with was a bunch of guys that kind of play shortstop. Semion's a great get, Bichette's a great get, but I'm not sure how this is going to look defensively. I know it's just spring training, but there was a clip today of Bo Bichette's first ever career throw from third base, and he threw the first baseman way off the bag. This doesn't look like a gun defensive team to me. Soto's never been a plus defender. So you're really relying on this team to be scoring a lot more runs than maybe a better drilled team like the Braves. And then for the Phillies, I'm just not sure I'm loving the offseason they've had. You've had Bryce Harper coming out and sort of responding publicly to some of the criticism he's been facing. Obviously, the Castellanos thing was probably a pretty large distraction too. I think it's a solid lineup. I like that they've added Adolis Garcia as a power bat. But you do wonder with some of these guys like a Kyle Schwarber, are they going to keep performing at the same level that they have, or are things going to start to drop off a little bit? And then there's obviously a lot of question marks too as far as the rotation. Christopher Sanchez had a brilliant year. Jesus Luzardo is someone I love to back for strikeouts every start or every couple of starts, and every couple of starts I hate myself for it. Aaron Nola really blew up in a bad way last year a couple of times. Taijuan Walker, Andrew Painter is someone to be excited about, I think. And then Zach Wheeler will come back at some stage after opening day. I think the Phillies are what they've been for a while, which is a really solid team. But if I'm picking a team to make a big leap, and if I'm forgiving last year, I'm pretty happy to take the Braves at $2.80.
So if we look at where Fangraphs have these 3 teams, I mean, when you look at the projected wins for the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies, Fangraphs have got them all within 3 games of each other. So I mean, that essentially tells you why that market is so tight. And look, I think depending on the day you wake up and the news that come in, you mentioned the news from Spencer Schwellenbach. I mean, as day of recording, we're still a little over a little over a month away from from opening day, things could change. And that's probably the one thing with this market in terms of how you play it. If you like the Braves today, on day of recording the 23rd of February, are you putting that wager on, or are you just waiting to get a little bit closer to opening day to make sure that you've got a full strength team that, maybe there isn't a guy that's out for a month or two that you were banking on being a big offensive bat, or if the Braves, God forbid, lose another arm. It sounds like they had two go down today. So with a market that is this tight, that is so obviously so player dependent, and it's, the margins are razor thin, not only in the odds, but obviously in what Fangraphs thinks. I mean, it's gotten separated by 3 wins across the course of a 162 win season. So is that the kind of bet that you're putting on now, or are you just waiting a little bit closer to opening day?
Look, as a general rule, and there are some exceptions to that, but as a general rule for me, the lower the price, or I guess by the same token, the closer the price to the next dangers in the market, the longer I'm happy to wait. Whereas if we were talking about something like, the Pirates to finish second in the division, for example, at $9, I'd be much more inclined to take that now because, by all sort of implied odds and probabilities, a lot could go wrong, but they're already factoring in that things will go wrong. But if things start to go wrong for other teams, your $9 about the Pirates finishing second becomes 5 or 6 really quickly, and you've lost a fair bit of value. I'm not sure how much will change for any of these 3 teams over the next month that would move the Braves price from beyond 280, in either direction, which means you can probably leave it and have a little bit more clarity as we get into opening day, or even just place it, the week of opening day, because another arm going down might move it out to $3. The Mets and Phillies having some issues might move you into 260, but that's not really making a big impact on your return here. So I'm pretty comfortable to let the Braves one sit out for a little bit longer.
Just a couple more things on the NL East. How's Joey Wentz just copying random strays from you, by the way? Just some guy called Joey Wentz. Like, former first round pick. I don't know what he did to you. I mean, he has had 4 teams in 4 years and has a career WAR of -2 as a starting pitcher. But I didn't expect him to be copying strays from Spoon on the podcast today, but that's why you. The other thing that I do think has gone under the radar is, I mean, you mentioned him there, Adolis Garcia going to the Phillies. Where do they hit him in the order? Because he could be a ton of fun in that Phillies lineup.
Yeah, the projected lineup I'm looking at has him hitting 6, with Trey obviously leading off. Bryce has batted second, Kyle Schwarber batting third, Alec Boehm batting fourth. That's kind of been their MO for a while. They've got Brandon Marsh batting 5, and I think that's just to break up some lefty-righty stuff, and then get Adolis Garcia in at 6. And I think if you looked at the Rangers last year, due to some of Garcia's struggles, I reckon he was batting about 6 pretty consistently. I'm just going to pull that up actually to fact check myself because I enjoyed doing that. I think he was batting, sort of down the lineup. Where are we? He batted 4th a lot at the start of the season, and then he was batting 5th, the second most, and batting 7th, the third most. So he really did drop off in a big way, production wise, and that was sort of reflected with where he ended up on that batting order. So I think he's a clear bounce back candidate for sure for the Phillies. But for me, I think I look at that lineup, they're hoping 2 or 3 guys bounce back, and they're also hoping that 2 or 3 guys stay at that same level. Whereas I just see a lot more upside in Atlanta, both pitching and run production wise.
What's the last team, do you think? And I'm trying to think of this as I'm asking the question. What's the last team that would have had 2 guys with 200 or more strikeouts in the same lineup over the course of the season? Because the Phillies would be a candidate for that this year.
Which the Yankees? They can't keep their guys healthy, but there'd be. Surely the Rockies had a couple of those guys last year, didn't they?
Oh yeah, true. I guess like major teams,
good teams or all teams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with bad teams, it's those stats for futility you can probably just chalk up year after year. But I guess contending I mean, this just is the direction baseball's going, right? Like, I can't think of the last time that a major contending team would have had 2 guys in the lineup that are perfectly capable of being everyday players and thus striking out 200 or more times over the course of the season.
I do stand corrected and apologize to our one Rocky fan who listens. Jordan Beck was actually the leader in strikeouts last year with 174. So they did avoid that.
It's hard to do. Like, striking out 200 times in a season is hard to do, man.
Yeah. Yeah,
So, I
James
mean,
Wood
when you
had
look at it, like Kyle
221.
Schwarber led the league. I mean, in the last 2 years, he's been 3 shy. So he's had 197 strikeouts the last 2 years, but he led the league the 2 previous seasons with 215 and 200. Adolis Garcia has never struck out 200 times, but he's a candidate to do so. I mean, he's been in the 180s on a couple of different occasions in his career. It's something that if both of those guys stay healthy, that could legitimately happen, and the Phillies could still win the division. It's mind-boggling to me. It's crazy.
There was actually only 2 guys in baseball last year to have 200 or more. We know who one of them is because we've spoken about how he's going to hit 40 bombs this year. Can you name the other one?
Last year,
I can give you a division. I can give you a team. Depends how much help you want.
is it obvious?
No, not at all. I wouldn't have picked it.
Oh, well, then we're probably going to be here forever. You should just tell me who it is.
He's a Detroit Tiger, and it's not Javi Baez.
Is it Torkelson?
Riley Green struck out 201 times last year. That flew way under my radar. I had no idea he had that much swing and miss in his game.
That's insane. Torkelson struck out 170 times, so I wasn't too crazy. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I wouldn't. You could have given me 50 guesses without giving me team or division, and I don't know that his name would have come out of my mouth.
Yep.
Interesting. So, look, that we'll leave the National League there. So, just to review, Spoon is tipping the Dodgers to win the West, but is saying maybe the best market there is for the Diamondbacks and the Giants to finish second in that division. Probably the most clear-cut one, of the easy one, is the Chicago Cubs to win the NL Central, and then he's tipping the Atlanta Braves, the slight outsider at $2.80 to win the NL East. If you did have to have a second-place bet, I guess, Spoon, quickly on the NL Easts, who is the team you're taking?
Oh, it's really tricky because I've kind of knocked them both as part of my way of promoting the Braves. And
Not just people. Like I said, Joey Wentz it was like
the general rule, if you want to, for no reason, want to lose the title, some guy, you have to have positive WAR. So if Joey Wentz can post a 2-WAR season this year, he won't be some guy.
Called Joey Wentz. That may be the title of this episode.
As much as I'd love to double down on a Nationals or a Marlins, it's not going to happen. I think give me the Mets because I think as much as I'm questionable about that rotation, the lineup is quite strong and they will be scoring a lot of runs. And, we talked about how it might be a 6-man rotation with Senga, or they're in a prime position to just quickly shift to a 5-man rotation. I think Freddie Peralta's a really nice add there. And look, Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco, Luis Robert. Don't forget the Mets went and added that guy. Brett Beatty, Marcus Semien, Francisco Alvarez, Tyrone Taylor. They're going to be scoring a lot of runs. And I do think this is going to be a team I'm going to be betting a lot of match overs on this year, particularly when they're further down the rotation, like a Sean Manaea, David Peterson type of starts, SP4 versus SP4. I think the Mets games are going to be quite high scoring. But I'm just not sure it's going to stack up as well with the fundamentals compared to the Braves.
Well, let's move on to the American League now, which also has several interesting divisions. We'll do the same. We'll move from west to east. So let's take a look at the AL West. The Seattle Mariners are favorites to back up and win that division again in 2026. $2.10 the price that you're getting for Seattle. At time of recording, the Astros are the second favorite at $3. The Rangers, $4.40. And then it's out to the A's at $17, which is somewhat of a surprising price. And the LA Angels are the outsider in the field at $34. So the favorite is the Mariners to win the division in 2026. Spoon, who are we playing as the division champ out west in the American League?
Well, this one's really interesting with Fangraphs. They've got a 61.6% chance for the Mariners. They've got them projected to win 88 games, and they've got the Rangers and Astros both at 80.4. So nearly an 8-game projected lead, which does suggest that the Mariners should be shorter than $2.10. But I'm actually taking them on. I really like the Texas Rangers this year. They've got a 14% win chance, according to Fangraphs, which is right in line with where the Astros are at. But I think they're another team for me that last year were too bad to be true. They just could not seem to get all of their guys up and healthy at the same time. They've got an awesome rotation that just struggled with injuries, throughout the season. There were times where we were talking about DeGrom as a potential AL Cy Young, dark horse sort of midway through the season. They've got Nathan Eovaldi, who I think was brilliant, but he even struggled to kind of consistently make his starts. What did he make? He made 22 starts last year. He had a 1.73 ERA, and he posted 4.3 WAR. Like, if he had a full season, he probably does win the Cy Young. And that's not to say he's going to be, at the age of 36, suddenly winding back the clock, and the same with DeGrom. What I really like about the Rangers is they added my guy / our guy, Mackenzie Gore, in a move that I think maybe flew under the radar for a lot of people. Mackenzie Gore was awesome last year for the Nats. Like, he was just, shoving. He had an ERA just over 4, but he was one of the best strikeout artists in all of baseball last year. He made 30 starts, so he's kind of going to be the consistent piece of that rotation, I think. And then if you look down at 4 and 5, they got Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker, who were 2 of the highest rated college pitching prospects for a long time. They haven't figured it out yet, but I think they've got the coaching staff from a pitching point of view that this year could click. And if one of those 2 guys hits anything close to the potential that we heard about them, coming into draft time, I think that looks like a really nice rotation. You're going to need more out of the lineup. I thought the move to go get Brandon Nimmo was pretty savvy. I don't hate a guy like that in the leadoff spot, because they really struggled with getting guys on base last year. And, when they were hitting home runs with a Corey Seager, there was never anyone on. So then you've got Wyatt Langford in the 2, Corey Seager at 3, Jake Berger at 4, Jock Peterson at 5, who genuinely had a season I don't think can possibly be repeated. He was awful. He had a negative WAR last year. He was their big sort of free agent DH splash. He only hit 9 home runs and he played nearly 100 games. So I think he's going to have a level of bouncing back to form. I mean, Wyatt Langford posted a 5.6 WAR last year. I think because of where the Rangers were, they probably, some of these headlines got forgotten a little bit. Corey Seager had 6.2 WAR and he only played 100 games. So you're betting on health a little bit with some of these guys, but they've had a stacked farm system for a while, and they've always been able to bring up these really exciting power and speed kind of combo players on top of a rotation that I think, if healthy, is going to look really good. Mackenzie Gore can back up on last year. Leiter and Rocker are the ceiling plays there to round that out. I really like them at $4.40. I think they're going to be right in this the whole way.
Can they win 90 games? The Mariners are projected at 88 wins, which is 7 wins more than what Fangraphs is projecting. The Rangers, maybe it takes 90 wins to win the AL West. I mean, it's been a pretty competitive division. A lot of times those top 3 teams do beat up on each other, being the Mariners, the Astros, and the Rangers, and then obviously beat up on the A's and the Angels. Do you think if it takes 88 to 90 wins, the Rangers can get there in 2026?
I think there's 2 parts to this. I'm expecting the Rangers to be better, but I'm also just a little hesitant on the Mariners. And, my formula with most things baseball-wise is no secret. I'm kind of expecting that maintaining last year's level is so difficult to do. Every team's trying to get better, and the Mariners were really good last year. But is Cal Raleigh going to hit that many home runs again? I'm not sure. Josh Naylor was a great add from them, from the D-backs at the deadline. I don't know if he's going to back it up again this year. J-Rod, yes, definitely, I think can continue to improve. But if you look at the bottom half of their lineup, you've got Randy in 5. Then you've got a lot of uncertainty. And even the list I've got in front of me right now has 2 guys listed at 6, 7, and 8. They've got Dominic Canzone and Rob Refsnyder at 6, which is kind of like meh. Luke Raley and Victor Robles at 7. And the fact that these guys are listed there kind of just suggests it's one or the other, because there's no standout for that position or that role. And then Cole Young and Cole Emerson in 8, as well as JP Crawford, who's, effectively a glove first exclusive player right now. Former Cardinal Brandon Donovan is leading that lineup of. I'm not sure I like it anywhere near as much as I did last year. And I think, they're going to need some of these draft picks to hit. Their first round picks from 2022, 2023 were Cole Young and Colt Emerson, and that's who they're kind of expecting to pad out this lineup a little bit. But by the same token, you could say the same thing about a Kumar Rocker or a Jack Leiter for the Rangers, and them kind of going to the next level. So we'll see. I mean, what's always strong in Seattle is the starting pitching, and this year is no different at all. I mean, Logan Gilbert, Brian Wu, George Kirby, Luis Castillo, Bryce Miller, that is a very, very strong 1 to 5. Not discrediting that at all. And, the bullpen's also been lights out for a long time too. I'm just not sure I can take $2.10, and I'm not sure I can agree with Fangraph's 70% chance of winning that division, when I think the Rangers had a hell of a lot of excuses last year. They've got nothing but upside this year. And what did they finish last year? Yeah, okay. They finished 9 games behind them last year, but I'm kind of thinking there's maybe six wins improvement in the Rangers this year. And all of a sudden, if 2 or 3 of last year's brilliant season wins from the Mariners drop off, we're looking at something that looks a much closer race.
Yeah, well, certainly one of the more interesting picks that we've had from you today. So going with the Rangers at $4.40 to topple the Mariners, who are the favorites in the AL West. Look, I promise I didn't plan it this way, but I did look it up. And the last time that one team had 2 hitters of 200 or more strikeouts in the same season was the Seattle Mariners in 2023. Do you care to take a stab as to who those 2 guys were?
Let me think.
So it's happened recently. That was a lot more recent than what I was expecting.
They didn't have Randy yet, did they?
They didn't have Randy, no.
Was Riley one of them?
No.
Okay. Let me think this through. I feel like I'm gonna miss it, and then I'm gonna be very upset about it. Because that lineup,
I think that's exactly what's going to happen if
that lineup changed a lot as well. So some of the guys you would think weren't actually there, like even if Gino
guy was there and then wasn't and then was again. And you're very familiar with him. Yes. Gino struck out 214 times. Who was the guy that struck out 211 in that lineup in 2023?
Outfield or infield?
He's a utility guy, but largely an outfielder. You may not even remember him playing in Seattle.
No, I'm blanking.
It's Teoscar Hernandez.
Ah, of course. Yeah, I actually don't. I think of him as obviously a bad guy Dodger, but then I think of him as a Blue Jay, probably second most.
It's so that year Gino struck out 214 times and Teoscar struck out 211. So it's happened a lot more recently than what I expected. And look, it was a nice segue out of talking about how the Mariners aren't going to win the division in 2026. So as we continue to move toward the East, let's get to the AL Central, which is largely, usually always a very ho-hum division. I mean, we talk about this a lot with Eric tipping Kansas City, Minnesota unders in May that nobody wants to watch. But it does feel like this division has gotten a little bit of a glow up in the last couple of years. I mean, obviously Detroit has kind of had a stranglehold on that division. It's felt like they've been the best team in that division for the past few years. But this market probably is tighter than maybe what I expected when I first pulled it up. So we'll have a look at it. The Tigers are $2.20 favorites to win the division again in 2026. But as you've already talked about, the Kansas City Royals, you think is a great value play. You spoke about that a couple of weeks ago, and I imagine we'll probably touch on it again. $3.25, the second favorites. Out $1 from there, the Guardians are $4.25, and then it's out to $10 for the Twins and $36 for the White Sox to win the AL Central. So it is an interesting market. How are you playing this one?
Yeah, one really interesting point. I mean, to your comment just now about it feeling like the Tigers have had the division on lock for a little bit. Even I forgot this. The Tigers didn't even win the division last year. They went on that absolutely historic collapse and let the Guardians come back and win the division.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
In my head, I'm with you. The Tigers won that division. It was like wrapped up. I think we even talked about them at like $1.10 in an August show, saying like, don't even bother putting it in your multis. They're too short. And the Guardians just had a dominant finish of the season, and the Tigers fell off.
Well, yeah, of course, because those teams played each other right at the end of the season, and it was epic, right? Because the atmosphere in Cleveland was like a postseason atmosphere prior to the postseason. That's right. I had completely forgotten about that collapse because Detroit was so far in front the entire year.
Yeah, and in my head, they won that division by 10 or 15 games. In reality, they didn't even win it, and they only finished 5 games clear of the Royals. So, yeah, no surprise. I mean, I like the Royals for a few different reasons this year. I think the Tigers, it felt like the Tigers had an unbelievable season last year, and they won 87 games. So, admittedly, I love the Framba Valdez add to a rotation that was sort of thin behind, a Cy Young winner as your ace. But I'm not sure how many of those guys are going to back up on what was a really solid season all around. I think they were one of the only teams that had something like 7 or 8 position players with like 2 WAR or more. And they actually had no standout in that department, by the way, either. I mean, Dylan Dingler led the Tigers with 3.1 WAR. And then they just had a flurry of guys in the mid 2s. So I guess you could look at that 2 different ways. You could say, they're not hinging on one guy, so it's more sustainable. But at the same time, where's the big upside coming from? And if they do repeat the season they had from last year, and maybe they add a couple of wins thanks to Framba Valdez, you're still looking at kind of, I think 87, 88 wins, which is, in line with Fangraphs projections. They've got them at 86 wins and a 59% chance to win the division. But I just see a lot more upside in the Royals, and I think they're the clear danger in a division where, look, the vibes in Minnesota are terrible. It's I've said this before, but it's Joe Ryan, Byron Buxton, and friends. I think the vibes in Cleveland have to be just as bad with, the Class A stuff coming out when it did. Last year felt like they made that, movie fairy tale run to come and win the division and then just kind of did nothing with it. And the White Sox are, the White Sox. So I think this is a two-horse race, and I think it's quite close in almost any situation where something's a two-horse race and it's quite close. I'd like to take the $3.25.
When we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I mean, I did steal your thunder a little bit because we talked about this as kind of an early play. Whenever we first jumped back on the pod after our 5-month hiatus, I assume nothing that you've seen in the last couple of weeks has dissuaded you from wanting to continue to play that. But is it just strictly a win play for the Royals, or do you hedge it with potentially looking at them to finish exactly second as well?
I don't think you're going to get any value on that beyond, let me check quickly, but I think you're going to get $2.50 about that. And at that point, if I'm wrong about the Twins or the Guardians, I'm kind of exposed on both fronts there. Like, if they not only don't win, but they finish second, the price isn't going to be good enough to make it worth taking second. Let's have a quick look. KC. $3.20 to finish second. It's the same price as winning the division. If I'm wrong there and they finish third, I'm wrong twice and I'm kind of doubling down. Whereas I think it's almost a 50-50 bet in my head to give me the 320 about it. If the Tigers are too good, the Tigers are too good. But I don't think I need to sort of get cute on a couple of outliers and a team that you can almost never pick in the Guardians. And even when they were almost mathematically ruled out last year, they still won the division. So I think, have my 1.5 units or whatever it ends up being on the Royals, maybe even 2, because I do like them. And then just let it play out throughout the year. Again, with an opportunity to, re-up throughout the season, because these division markets will be there pretty much all year round. I think if the Royals start a little bit worse than expected, you might be able to get a bigger price and I might go again. But yeah, look, the AL Central is such a strange division. I'm going to try and limit my exposure to that because, yeah, weird things seem to happen. You're going to get 4 teams probably in that 80 win range. There's no standout. I don't think the Tigers are going to dominate and run away with it. They had the chance to do that last year and they couldn't do it. So let's just see how the Royals go.
It does feel to me like, and this is crazy to say, and like I've forever been a Royals hater because that's just what you do when you're in St. Louis, but I try to limit that now because the Cardinals are going to be terrible. It really does feel like this Royals team this year could be super fun offensively. Obviously with Salvi and Pasquatch, really looking forward to seeing what Caglione does, like in stepping up and actually having a full proper season. And then, I mean, obviously guys like Bobby Witt Jr., it really feels like this Royals team could be fun.
Yeah, I think they've got a really nice blend of like hitting for contact, hitting for power, and base running speed, especially with Bobby Witt there too. I mean, they had, looking at this before, they had Bobby Witt stole 38 bases last year. Michael Garcia stole 23. And then when you're talking about guys, like a Caglione type or something like that coming in, I think there's a lot of upside here in the fact that there's a lot of unknown. I mean, they've even got Lane Thomas in the lineup now. Jonathan India. There's a few guys here that are kind of like reclamation projects, or they're maybe even change of scenery guys. Whereas I'm looking at a lineup full of Detroit Tigers last year, who all had 2-something WAR, so they were good, not great. And I'm just wondering if they showed us who they are last year, but this year the Royals will show us who they are.
Yeah, it feels like there's guys with potential higher upside in Kansas City than what there is in Detroit. And if obviously all those guys fire in the same season, then at $3.25 looks like pretty good value. So 2 interesting plays in the American League so far. Spoon liking the Rangers in the West and Kansas City in the AL Central. So we move to our final division, which is the American League East. And the Yankees are the favorites, $2.55. I think I said on this program a couple weeks ago that I think they could finish as low as 4th in this division. And look, the market is pretty tight. The Yankees $2.55 favorites. The Jays $3.60 on the second line of betting. The Red Sox $4.20 and the Orioles $5.75. So look, you've got 4 teams all under $6 to win the division, and then it's out to $26 for Tampa Bay. But I know you've already given some thoughts on this division. You're high on the Baltimore Orioles this year. Are you high enough to take him at 575 to win the AL East?
I absolutely am. Yeah, I think this is, those who have listened to the last few weeks, I'll sort of recap some of my thinking there and just pointing to the Fangraphs projections one last time. They've got the Yankees at 86.5 wins, 32% chance of winning the division. Blue Jays, 23% chance. Red Sox, 22% chance. And the Orioles at 17%. I think a few things there that are really interesting that we've already talked about is I don't know where this hype for the Red Sox is coming. I'm just not a big fan of where they're positioned heading into the season. I know they were trying to sign a few more players and they managed to. I just don't love the vibe in Boston right now. Whereas I love the vibe about the Orioles. I love that they came out of nowhere. They've shown intent when no one was expecting it. Like, if you gave me 10 guesses about where Pete Alonso was going to sign, I wouldn't have guessed Baltimore. And again, I'm heavily against the Yankees being the clear favorite for this division too. I think, we've already talked about, and part of the reason I like Cam Schlittler to start the year is because Cole is going to be on the IL. They've got Rodon on the IL to start the year as well. Max Fried really held his own last year, but he's going to need to do it again. And that rotation drops off in a hurry. And there's so much swing and miss in that team. Like, it is Trent Grisham, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Ben Rice, Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm, Ryan McMahon, Jose Caballero, and Austin Wells. Like, eye test wise, this is a team I'm going to be attacking so aggressively from a strikeout point of view early on, because there's multiple guys in that lineup that can have 2, 3, 4 strikeout type nights. I think there's a little bit of main, big market bias here, because I don't know how you can look at how the season ended last year, not just with Toronto winning that division, but also the run they went on and being a few inches away multiple times from winning the whole World Series and have them $1 behind the Yankees. So to answer your question, I'll be taking the Orioles at 575. And I think if I price shop a little bit, I'll be able to get 650 somewhere, which is going to be a really nice price. But I'm probably going to stake maybe half of what I stake on the Orioles on the Blue Jays as well, to reinforce how heavily against both Boston and New York I am from a projected win perspective.
And I mean, if you could find a market where you could lay the Yankees to win the division, that's something that I would be looking at doing. $2.55. I suppose if you laid them, you're probably getting the equivalent of
140.
Yeah, well, I guess it would be a little bit better than that, but I just, yeah, this division seems wide open to me. So for the Yankees to be $2.55, maybe that's a weight of money thing. It's just the respect in the fact that it's the Yankees. I don't really know why they're that short. I mean, I think you could have realistically, I think you could have the AL East be $3 the field, right? Like, if none of these teams was shorter than $3, I think you could justify that. So having the Yankees at $2.55, I think you have to play around them. And then to your point, it's basically the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, and the Orioles are all priced to the point to where you can, have a unit on one and half a unit on another. And it just sounds like you've settled on the Orioles and the Blue Jays for the reasons discussed.
Yeah, I think, these are definitely, and especially when you're backing kind of two teams, it is a little bit interesting. And whereas, with the NL Central, for example, I'm just making a case that the Cubs are that much better than everyone else. With the AL East, I'm making a case that that's not the case at all, with the Yankees. And yeah, I have this as a 3-horse race. I mean, Boston could come out and prove me completely wrong. Wouldn't be the first or the last time that happens. But I see this as a 3-horse race between the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and the Orioles right now, which makes 575 just terrific value.
So it's interesting because you basically have gone somewhat chalky in the National League, with, I suppose, the exception of the Mets, but the Braves are only 5 cents worse than the Mets at $2.80. So you've basically gone all chalk in the National League, but you've given us a lot of value in the American League. And I know personally, whenever you do play these division winners, that you like to look at what you would consider lock, some of the best bets, and pair that with what you feel like the best value play is. So if you were going to multi a few of these up to try and increase value, what do you feel like the best play is from a multi standpoint in obviously looking at trying to parlay some of these together?
I think a no-brainer for me will be the two NL plays, ignoring the West. To get close to $6.50 about the Cubs and the Braves to win their division just feels like terrific value. And again, if you take that early and the Braves end up in the Cubs run away with the division, which could well happen, but the Braves end up in a two-team war in the East with either the Phillies or the Mets, you'll be able to lay a fair bit of this bet off throughout the year. And if you're getting, 250 about the Mets or the Phillies later in the year, when the Braves have a bit of a lead, but the Cubs are pretty much home, and you're also sitting on a $6.50 ticket with the two from the start of the year, you can lock in some profit pretty handily. So I'm pretty happy with that as a two-legger. I mean, if you really wanted to round out like an NL West bet, and you were kind of following where my thinking was, you could look at throwing, splitting this into two and throwing a third leg in of D-backs to finish second and the Giants to finish second. And if you were to do that, your price would be getting right up there. You'd be looking at close to 20s or 30s for the two. For the three. Obviously, they can't both win, but you'd need the D-backs or the Giants to finish second to round that out. But at $6.50 for Braves and Cubs, I think that's going to be the sort of safe one, inverted commas, out of everything that's been discussed today. I think then for me, it's a bit trickier. And to be fair, when some of these are already quoted $3.25 about the Royals, $4.40 about the Rangers, and nearly $6 about the Orioles, you don't need to necessarily be multiing these. They're already really nice prices. I would take the Royals and the Rangers, though, together, because I think I'm only worried about one team in both of those. The Royals, I'm worried about the Tigers, and I've kind of put a line through the Guardians and the Twins, albeit they could come out and prove me wrong. And I didn't really touch on it enough when we were talking about the AL West, but I can't have the Astros at $3 to win that division. The rotation is basically Hunter Brown and a bunch of guys who are probably SP3 to 5s on other teams. And I don't really love what they've done lineup-wise either. Their lineup is just, I've seen a lot of holes down the bottom. I know I've said Yordan Alvarez is going to hit 150 home runs this year, but it's not consistent enough for me to have them ahead of the Rangers. So in the AL West, I'm worried about one team, the Mariners. The AL Central, I'm worried about one team, the Tigers. You can get $15 just about between the Rangers and the Royals, and I think that's a really nice price as a double. And I'm not going to be throwing in anything to do with the East in any multis because of the fact that I like two teams, I don't like two teams, but there's too many different combinations you'd need to find value there to not end up having so many bets on that you're mitigating any chance of a positive return.
So look, a couple different multi-plays that you can do that obviously are split by division. So two that you can play in the NL, two that you can play in the AL. When it just comes out to a single wager, a single investment, which of these plays do you feel like excites you the most? If one of the listeners was going to have $10 on one of these and barrack a team whole for the entire season, which of these gets you the most up and about?
Well, I mean, the absolute best bet for me, I think, is the Cubs. I know they're the shortest of the lot at $2.20, but if I saw them at $1.70, I wouldn't disagree with it, albeit I probably wouldn't be backing it as a single. I think if you made the case for them being $1.70, that would be fine, because if you look at the market share here, they've got the Reds at $4.50, which I can't have, and that's the only thing keeping the Cubs out of being odds on effectively. So I think as a best, a straight best, it's got to be the Cubs at $2.20, and I think as a best value, it's the Orioles at $6, because they are, in my mind, better than at least one of the teams in front of them, and as good as one, if not both, of the others.
So we'll come back and look at this in October, because Spoon is projecting all chalk in the National League and utter chaos in the American League in 2026. Don't forget, we are starting to get through the process of getting the website up. So plays like this from Spoon can be available for your viewing pleasure at baseballexpats.com. We should have the website up and running in the next couple of weeks, and we do still have one more edition of Spoon's Future Plays. Part 4 will drop later on this week, where Spoon will go through some of the postseason award markets and have a look at what he likes best before he hops on a big bird and goes to Vegas, because you've been home for 10 days now, and you're already starting to get itchy feet, so you need to leave again.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and not just for Vegas. Almost this time next week, I'm going to be in Arizona. I'm going to get to some spring training games. So I've never done spring training. It's something I've always wanted to do. I wouldn't travel just for that, but given I'm going to be, a 45-minute flight away, I figured what's an extra few nights in the desert. And I'm actually looking at D-backs versus Mexico as a game, which could be a lot of fun. So yeah, I'll have to get some content on the baseball expats and the Spoon Does Baseball socials of that, and potentially some stage next week just drop a silo session that you kind of flagged last week as well, just a solo episode, anything that sort of caught my eye that week, and maybe how the big plays that we flagged over these 4-part previews have changed with anything I've seen at spring training or any other headlines coming out of the league.
Well, it wouldn't be a Baseball Expats episode if the three of us weren't all on different continents. Eric, of course, in Asia. Spoon will be in North America, and somebody's got to hold down the fort in Australia. So I suppose that'll be me for the next couple of weeks. But again, we will be back later on this week. Spoon will give us his plays in the awards markets in Major League Baseball. Spoon, enjoyed that, my friend. Look forward to chatting to you later in the week.
See you in a few days, mate.